I found out my son was stealing my life savings at 2 a.m. while he was passed out drunk on a cruise ship, posting pictures of himself spending my money while I sat in my kitchen reading his fake rehab bills. I was sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at photos of my son on a Norwegian cruise ship, while his fake rehab bills sat unopened on my table. Let me tell you something about betrayal. It doesn't hit you like a slap across the face. It creeps up on you like ice water, filling your lungs, slowly drowning you in disbelief until you can't breathe. That's exactly how I felt when I saw those pictures of Danny, my 35-year-old son, toasting champagne on the deck of a luxury cruise liner, while I had been sending him money for drug rehabilitation that never existed. For 6 months, I had been his lifeline. Every tearful phone call about how he was fighting for his life in treatment. Every desperate plea for just a little more money to stay clean and get better. Every guilt-laden conversation where he told me I was the only person who believed in him, the only one who could save him from overdosing in some alley. I liquidated part of my retirement savings. I took money from the emergency fund my late husband Carlos had insisted we keep untouched. I gave Danny $47,000 of my life savings because I thought I was saving my baby boy's life. But there he was in those photos, looking healthier and happier than I had seen him in years, grinning at the camera with a frozen margarita in one hand and his arm around some blonde woman in a bikini. The timestamp on the photo was from yesterday. Yesterday, when he had called me sobbing about how hard recovery was and how he needed another $3,000 for extended therapy sessions. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more pictures on his Instagram account that he had apparently forgotten I could see. Danny lounging by the pool. Danny at the buffet, piling his plate high with lobster and prime rib. Danny in the casino, holding up a stack of chips with the caption, "Living my best life, thanks to my guardian angel mom." Guardian angel. That's what he called me while he was robbing me blind. Hey, beautiful soul. Before we dive in, show some love with a like, tap subscribe, and tell me, where in this big, beautiful world are you watching from? The worst part wasn't even the money, though God knows that hurt. The worst part was realizing that every single emotion I had felt over the past 6 months had been manufactured by my own son. The sleepless nights I spent worrying he might not make it through treatment. The tears I cried, thinking about how addiction had stolen my sweet boy. The pride I felt when he would call with updates about his progress in recovery. All of it was a lie. All of it was just Danny playing the role of his life to steal from his 72-year-old widowed mother. I sat there in that kitchen, surrounded by the bills I had been too stressed to open and the legal documents I had been putting off reviewing. And I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just angry. I was done. Completely, utterly done with being played for a fool by someone I had loved unconditionally since the day he was born. And I already knew exactly what I was going to do about it. Because I had already made the call to my lawyer, I need to back up and tell you how I got to this point. Because 3 years ago, I never would have imagined my own son could deceive me so completely. My name is Susan Martinez, and I'm 72 years old. I live alone now, in the house my husband Carlos and I bought in Phoenix back in 1987. Carlos died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, and losing him nearly broke me. We had been married for 48 years, and he was my anchor, my voice of reason, my everything. When he passed, I inherited his life insurance policy and our combined savings, leaving me with about $340,000. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable enough for a retired nurse to live independently and maybe leave something for my children. I have 3 kids. Carlos Jr. is my oldest at 40. And he's the responsible one. He's an accountant living in North Carolina with his wife and twin daughters. He calls me every Sunday, like clockwork, and visits twice a year. Then there's Maria, who's 38 and lives in California with her husband and 2 boys. She's busy with her own life, which I understand, but we text regularly and she checks on me. And then there's Danny, my baby. At 35, he's still my youngest, and I'll admit it, he was always my soft spot. While his siblings were getting married and building careers, Danny was the creative one, the dreamer. He studied graphic design in college, but never really found steady work. He would bounce between freelance projects and part-time jobs, always struggling financially, but always full of big plans about the business he was going to start, or the client who was going to change everything. After Carlos died, I became more giving with all my children, but especially with Danny. He was the one who needed help the most. And frankly, he was the one who asked for it. When Carlos Jr. suggested I be more careful with my money, I told him his brother was going through a rough patch and needed support. When Maria mentioned that Danny seemed to always have his hand out, I defended him, saying he was trying his best in a difficult economy. I trusted Danny completely, maybe too completely. About a year after Carlos passed, I added Danny to my main checking account so he could help me with online banking and bill paying. I thought it was practical. He was tech savvy, and I was still learning to manage everything alone. Carlos had always handled our finances, so having Danny's help made me feel less overwhelmed. The fake addiction story started 6 months ago with a phone call that still haunts me. Danny called me at 11 p.m., crying harder than I had heard him cry since he was a little boy. He told me he had been struggling with prescription pain medication that started after a back injury, and it had spiraled into something much worse. He said he was scared, that he needed help, and that he had found a treatment facility that could save his life. I never questioned it. Why would I? This was my son, asking his mother for help to get clean and sober. What kind of mother would I be if I said no? That phone call cost me everything I thought I knew about my youngest child. The discovery came from the most unexpected place. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lives 2 houses down, knocked on my door last Tuesday morning with her tablet in hand and concern written all over her face. "Susan, honey," she said, stepping into my living room, "I need to show you something, and I'm not sure how to say this gently." Mrs. Rodriguez explained that her teenage granddaughter had been showing her how to use Instagram to see photos of her family, and somehow Danny's account had come up in the suggestions. At first, she thought it was just old pictures, maybe from before his addiction problems started. But then, she noticed the dates. "These were posted yesterday," she said softly, turning the screen toward me. The first photo hit me like a physical blow. There was Danny, standing on what was clearly the deck of a cruise ship, holding up a tropical drink with a huge smile on his face. He was wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt I had never seen before, and his skin was tan in a way that spoke of days spent lounging in the sun, not struggling through rehab. The caption read, "Day 3 of Paradise. Nothing but blue skies and good vibes ahead." I stared at the photo, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "This can't be right," I whispered. "Danny is in treatment. He called me 3 days ago from the facility." But Mrs. Rodriguez kept scrolling, and the evidence became undeniable. Photo after photo of Danny living it up on what appeared to be a luxury cruise. Danny at an elegant dinner, raising a glass of wine. Danny by the pool with a group of friends, all of them laughing and clearly having the time of their lives. Danny in the ship's casino, holding up what looked like a significant pile of poker chips. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, I sat in Carlos's chair for what felt like hours, just staring at the stack of unopened mail on the coffee table. Among those envelopes were bills from the treatment facility that Danny had been supposedly attending. Bills I had been too emotionally drained to examine closely, trusting that they were legitimate because my son had given them to me himself. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, I sat in Carlos's. Then I saw the photo that made my blood run cold. It was Danny, with his arm around a woman about his age, both of them dressed up for what looked like a formal dinner. The caption read, "When your acting skills are so good, you can afford to treat your girl like a queen. Thanks to my guardian angel mom for making this trip possible. Sometimes the best performances deserve the biggest rewards. Guardian angel mom. Acting skills. Performances." I felt the room start to spin as the full weight of his betrayal crashed over me. Mrs. Rodriguez steadied me as I sank into Carlos's old recliner, the same chair where I had sat so many nights, worrying about Danny's recovery, praying for his safety. "There's more," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, and she showed me the comments on his posts. Friends congratulating him on his brilliant plan and asking for tips on managing family finances. One comment that made me physically sick read, "Dude, you're a genius. How long do you think you can keep this going?" Danny had responded, "As long as Mom keeps believing I'm her poor sick baby boy. She's good for at least another 6 months of this." I sat there, staring at my son's words, realizing that every conversation we'd had for the past 6 months had been nothing but a calculated performance designed to drain my bank account. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, I sat in Carlos's chair for what felt like hours, just staring at the stack of unopened mail on the coffee table. Among those envelopes were bills from the treatment facility that Danny had been supposedly attending. Bills I had been too emotionally drained to examine closely, trusting that they were legitimate because my son had given them to me himself. With trembling hands, I finally opened the first envelope. The letterhead looked professional enough, but as I read the details, inconsistencies jumped out at me. The facility's address was listed as a P.O. box. The treatment program descriptions were vague and generic. Most telling of all, the payment instructions directed me to send money orders to Daniel Martinez, rather than the facility itself. I had been sending money directly to my son for his own fake treatment. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I spent that entire night going through every piece of paperwork related to Danny's recovery. Bank statements, canceled checks, money transfer receipts. The numbers were devastating. In 6 months, I had given him $47,000. But it was worse than that. I discovered unauthorized transfers from my savings account, checks written with my signature but in Danny's handwriting, and even small cash withdrawals that I had attributed to my own forgetfulness, but now realized were Danny taking money during his visits to update me on his progress. By 3 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with every financial document spread out before me, and the total damage became clear. Danny hadn't just stolen the money I had willingly given him for treatment. He had been systematically draining my accounts for over a year, taking advantage of my grief and confusion after Carlos's death. The total was closer to $65,000. I thought about all those nights I had lain awake worrying about him, the times I had skipped buying myself new clothes or put off home repairs because I was saving every penny for Danny's recovery. I remembered the conversation I had with Carlos Jr., where I told him I couldn't visit his family for Christmas because I needed to keep my money available in case Danny had a medical emergency in treatment. The worst part was remembering the pride I had felt. When Danny would call with updates about his progress, I would hang up and think about what a good mother I was being, how Carlos would be proud of me for not giving up on our son, how I was proof that unconditional love could overcome addiction and save a family. But it had all been a lie. Every tear I had cried for Danny's struggle, every prayer I had said for his recovery, every sacrifice I had made to fund his treatment, all of it had been for nothing more than Danny's entertainment fund. I sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by evidence of my son's betrayal, and felt something I had never experienced before in my 72 years of life. It wasn't just heartbreak or anger or disappointment. It was a complete shift in my understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. For the first time since Carlos died, I felt truly alone. But for the first time in 6 months, I also felt completely clear about what I needed to do. But then I found something even more significant. Tucked behind the will was a folder labeled Danny, important, in Carlos's careful handwriting. Inside were documents I had completely forgotten about. 3 years ago, when Danny had been going through one of his rough patches, Carlos had quietly hired a private investigator to check on some inconsistencies in Danny's stories about why he needed money. But then I found something even more significant. Tucked behind the will was a folder labeled Danny, important, in Carlos's careful handwriting. Inside were documents I had completely forgotten about. 3 years ago, when Danny had been going through one of his rough patches, Carlos had quietly hired. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since Carlos's funeral. I went into our bedroom closet and pulled out the heavy fireproof box where we kept all our important documents. Carlos had always been meticulous about our paperwork, insisting we keep everything organized and accessible. "Susan," he used to say, "knowledge is power, and documentation is protection." I had avoided looking through these papers since he died because they reminded me too much of him. But now, with Danny's betrayal fresh in my mind, I needed to understand exactly what legal ground I was standing on. The first document I found was our will, updated just 2 years before Carlos passed. As I read through it, I realized Carlos had been more protective of our assets than I remembered. The will gave me complete control over all property and finances, with specific language about my right to make changes to beneficiaries, at my sole discretion and without requirement of explanation or justification. Carlos had insisted on that wording, and now I understood why. But then I found something even more significant. Tucked behind the will was a folder labeled Danny, important, in Carlos's careful handwriting. Inside were documents I had completely forgotten about. 3 years ago, when Danny had been going through one of his rough patches, Carlos had quietly hired a private investigator to check on some inconsistencies in Danny's stories about why he needed money. The investigator's report was damning. Danny had been lying about job interviews, fabricating stories about potential business partnerships, and had even created fake email accounts to send himself rejection letters from employers to explain why he couldn't find work. The report included screenshots of Danny's social media posts from that time, showing him at expensive restaurants and bars while telling us he was struggling to afford food. Carlos had never told me about this investigation. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note in his familiar script. "Susan, if you're reading this after I'm gone, please know that I didn't show you this because I didn't want to break your heart while I was still here to protect you. But Danny has been deceiving us for years. Trust your instincts, protect yourself, and don't let guilt make you vulnerable. You are stronger and smarter than you know. All my love, Carlos." I sat on our bedroom floor, holding my husband's final piece of advice, and realized he had been trying to protect me even from beyond the grave. But there was more in that box that would prove crucial. I found Danny's old laptop, the one he had left behind when he moved out 2 years ago, claiming it was broken beyond repair. Carlos had kept it, thinking it might be fixable someday. I plugged it in, and to my surprise, it booted up perfectly. What I found on that laptop was the smoking gun I didn't even know I needed. Danny's browser history from 2 years ago showed extensive research into how to fake medical documents, creating convincing treatment facility paperwork, and most chilling of all, elderly financial abuse, how to avoid prosecution. In his saved documents folder, I discovered what appeared to be a template for fake rehabilitation center bills, complete with multiple versions using different facility names. There were also detailed spreadsheets tracking my financial habits, noting when I typically checked my bank statements and how much money I had available in different accounts. This wasn't a desperate son making bad choices. This was a calculated long-term plan to systematically steal from his elderly mother. Armed with Carlos's hidden evidence and my own devastating discoveries, I knew I couldn't act on emotion alone. Carlos had always taught me that the best revenge is strategic, not impulsive. So I did something Danny would never expect from his gullible old mother. I began planning with the precision of a military operation. My first call was to Richard Hoffman, the attorney who had helped Carlos and me set up our estate planning. Richard had been Carlos's friend for over 20 years, and I trusted him completely. When I explained the situation and showed him the evidence, his reaction was swift and decisive. "Susan, what Danny has done constitutes elder financial abuse and fraud," Richard told me during our emergency meeting that afternoon. "The good news is that Carlos was brilliant in how he structured your legal protections. You have complete authority to make any changes you want to your estate, and Danny's criminal behavior gives us grounds to pursue full restitution." Richard walked me through my options, and I realized I had far more power than I had ever understood. Not only could I remove Danny from the will entirely, but I could also press criminal charges, pursue civil litigation for the stolen funds, and even place a lien on any assets he might have acquired with my money. But I wanted to be thorough before I acted. Richard recommended a forensic accountant to help document every fraudulent transaction, and he put me in touch with a private investigator to gather current information about Danny's activities and assets. I also decided to bring in my financial advisor, Margaret Chen, who had been managing my retirement accounts since Carlos died. Margaret was horrified when she saw the extent of the unauthorized withdrawals. "Mrs. Martinez, I wish you had called me sooner," she said. "We need to immediately secure all your remaining assets and create new accounts that Danny has never had access to." Over the next week, I methodically dismantled Danny's access to my financial life. I opened new accounts at a different bank, transferred all my money, and closed every account Danny had ever touched. I changed every password, every security question, and every piece of identifying information he might know. Margaret helped me set up additional safeguards, including requiring in-person authorization for any large transactions. The hardest part was maintaining the deception. Danny called me twice during that week, both times asking for more money for additional therapy sessions. I had to force myself to sound concerned and motherly while telling him I was working on getting the funds together. Meanwhile, I was secretly documenting every lie he told, every emotional manipulation he attempted. I also reached out to Carlos Jr. and Maria, though I didn't reveal the full extent of my plan. I simply told them that I had discovered Danny was not actually in treatment, and that he had been taking money under false pretenses. Both of them were shocked, but not entirely surprised. Carlos Jr. admitted he had always suspected something wasn't right about Danny's situation. Maria was more emotional, asking if there was anything she could do to help mediate. "The time for mediation is over," I told her. "Danny made his choice when he decided to steal from his widowed mother. Now I'm making mine." Richard helped me prepare a comprehensive package of evidence, including bank records, the fake treatment bills, screenshots from Danny's social media, and the damning documents from his old laptop. We also prepared criminal complaints for fraud and elder abuse, ready to file the moment I gave the word. But I wanted one more piece of insurance. I asked the private investigator to document Danny's current lifestyle and spending patterns. If he was going to claim he needed the money for legitimate purposes, I wanted proof of exactly how he had been using it. By the end of the week, I had transformed from a grieving, trusting mother into someone Danny had never met before. A woman who was fully informed, legally protected, and ready to fight back with everything I had. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was spring it. I waited until Danny called me again, asking for money. It didn't take long. 3 days after I had finished securing all my assets, my phone rang at 10 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I let it ring twice before answering, wanting to sound completely normal. "Hi, sweetie," I said, in the same warm, concerned tone I had been using for months. "How are you feeling today?" "Oh, Mom, I'm having such a hard time." Danny's voice came through, and I could hear the practiced tremor of emotion he had perfected. "The counselors here think I need to extend my program another month. It's really expensive, but they say if I don't complete the full treatment, I might relapse and lose everything we've worked for." For 6 months, those words would have sent me into a panic, reaching for my checkbook before he even finished speaking. Now, listening to his performance while looking at photos of him sipping champagne on a cruise ship, I felt nothing but cold clarity. "How much do you need this time, Danny?" I asked, my voice steady. "It's $8,500 for the extended program, Mom. I know it's a lot, but this is my life we're talking about. I'm finally getting better, and I can't quit now." I took a deep breath and made my voice sound slightly strained, as if I was struggling with the financial burden. "Danny, that's a lot of money, sweetheart. I've already given you so much for treatment. Let me call you back in a few minutes, okay? I need to check my account balance." "Of course, Mom. I understand. Just, please don't wait too long. They need an answer by tomorrow, or they'll give my spot to someone else." Always the urgency. Always the pressure. I hung up and waited exactly 15 minutes before calling him back. When he answered, his voice was hopeful and eager. "Danny," I said, and my tone was completely different now. Calm, cold, final. "I know about the cruise." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, and I could hear him scrambling. What cruise?" "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in treatment, you know that. I know about the Norwegian cruise ship. I know about the casino winnings. I know about your girlfriend in the bikini. I know about every single lie you've told me for the past 6 months." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. "I've seen the photos, Danny. I've read your comments about your guardian angel mom and your acting skills. Mom, listen, I can explain." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "I'm done listening to your explanations. I'm done being your guardian angel. I'm done being your victim." I could hear him starting to panic now, his voice rising. "Mom, please, you don't understand. Yes, okay, I took a little vacation, but I've been so stressed about treatment, and the doctors said—" "Danny, stop." I cut him off again. "I found your old laptop. I found the fake bill templates. I found your research on elder financial abuse. I know this has been planned for years." The silence this time was different, heavier. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the tearful, desperate son. In his place was someone I barely recognized. "So, what are you going to do about it?" he asked, and there was something almost challenging in his tone. "I've already done it," I replied calmly. "As of yesterday, you have no access to any of my accounts. The bank has been notified of the fraudulent activity. My lawyer has filed criminal charges for elder financial abuse and fraud. You've been completely removed from my will, and I've placed a lien on any assets you purchased with my stolen money. You can't do this to me." His voice exploded through the phone. "I'm your son. You can't just abandon your own child. You abandoned me the moment you decided to steal from your widowed mother," I said quietly. "You made your choice, Danny. Now live with the consequences." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. Then I sat in Carlos's chair and waited, because I knew this was just the beginning. Danny's counterattack began within hours. First came the calls from blocked numbers, which I simply didn't answer. Then the text messages from phone numbers I didn't recognize, alternating between desperate apologies and furious accusations. When those failed to get a response, he escalated to showing up at my front door. I was ready for him. Richard had advised me to install a security camera system, and I had done so the day before our confrontation. When Danny started pounding on my door at 11 p.m. that Thursday night, demanding I let him in and stop this insanity, I calmly called the police and informed them that someone was violating the restraining order I had filed that afternoon. Danny was arrested on my front lawn. The next morning, Maria called me, crying. "Mom, what have you done?" She sobbed into the phone. "Danny called me from jail. He says you've lost your mind and that you're accusing him of terrible things he never did." This was the conversation I had been dreading. Maria had always been the peacemaker in our family, and I knew Danny would try to use her against me. I had prepared for this moment carefully. "Maria, sweetheart, I need you to come see me this weekend," I said gently. "I have things to show you that will explain everything, but I need you to see the evidence with your own eyes." She arrived Saturday morning, still tearful and confused. I sat her down at my kitchen table and methodically walked her through everything. The cruise ship photos, the fake treatment bills, the evidence from his laptop, the unauthorized bank withdrawals. Maria's face went through a journey of emotions: disbelief, shock, anger, and finally, heartbroken acceptance. "My God, Mom," she whispered, staring at the bank statements. "He really did this. He really stole from you. And he's been planning it for years," I added, showing her the research files about elder abuse. But Danny wasn't done fighting. The following week, he enlisted help from my sister-in-law, Carmen, Carlos's younger sister, who had always had a soft spot for Danny. Carmen called me, furious. "Susan, I can't believe you would do this to that boy," she said. "He made a mistake, yes, but family forgives family. Carlos would be ashamed of how you're treating his son." That crossed a line I didn't know I had. "Don't you dare speak for my husband," I said, my voice ice cold. Carlos knew exactly what Danny was. He hired a private investigator years ago and documented Danny's lies. He left me a note warning me to protect myself from our son's deception. Carmen was stunned into silence, but Danny had more ammunition. 2 weeks later, I received legal papers claiming I was mentally incompetent and needed a guardian, with Danny volunteering for the role. The audacity was breathtaking. Richard demolished this attempt within days, using Danny's criminal charges and the extensive evidence of his fraud to demonstrate that he was the last person who should have any legal authority over my affairs. The judge was not amused by Danny's legal strategy. The final confrontation came on a Sunday morning at St. Catherine's Church, where I had been attending Mass for 30 years. I was sitting in my usual pew when Danny walked in during the opening hymn. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For just a moment, my heart softened, seeing my little boy struggling. Then he opened his mouth. "Mom!" he called out loudly, causing heads to turn throughout the church. "Please, I'm begging you. I'm your son. Don't let these lawyers turn you against your own family." He started walking toward me, and I could see he was planning to make a scene, to embarrass me into backing down. But I had learned something important over the past month. I was no longer the same woman who could be manipulated by guilt and emotion. I stood up calmly, turned to face the congregation, and spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried throughout the church. "My son has been stealing from me for months by pretending to need money for drug treatment while he was actually on vacation. Sometimes loving someone means protecting yourself from their crimes, even when that someone is your own child." The church was completely silent. Danny's face went white with shock and humiliation. He turned and walked out without another word. I sat back down and continued with Mass, feeling more at peace than I had in months. 8 months later, I'm sitting on the balcony of my new apartment in Sunrise Manor, a beautiful senior living community just outside Phoenix. It's 6 p.m., and I'm watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of gold and purple, while sipping tea from the cup Carlos gave me for our 40th anniversary. His photo sits on the small table beside me, and I swear I can feel him smiling. The apartment is perfect for me, secure, maintenance-free, and filled with neighbors who have become genuine friends. There's Eleanor, who teaches our book club and makes the most incredible banana bread. There's Frank, a retired police officer who helped me understand the legal process when Danny's case went to court. There's Margaret, not my financial advisor, but a different Margaret who lost her husband the same year I lost Carlos, and understands the particular loneliness of rebuilding your life alone. Danny was sentenced to 2 years probation and ordered to pay full restitution. He's working at a warehouse now, his first steady job in years, and every month a portion of his paycheck goes toward paying back what he stole. His lawyer tried to negotiate a lower amount, but Richard made sure the court understood the full extent of the theft. It will take Danny nearly 6 years to pay me back completely. I've heard through Maria that he's living in a studio apartment and taking the bus to work. Part of me, the mother part that will never completely disappear, feels sad about his circumstances. But a bigger part of me feels something I never expected. Relief. Relief that I no longer have to wonder when the next crisis call will come. Relief that I can make plans with my money without worrying about emergency requests. Relief that I can sleep through the night without anxiety about my son's well-being. The most unexpected gift has been my relationship with my other children. Carlos Jr. visits more often now, bringing his daughters to spend weekends with Grandma in her fancy new place. Maria and I talk every few days, and she's planning to bring her boys for Christmas. We're closer now than we've been in years, bonded by the shared understanding of what we all survived. I've also found purpose in ways I never imagined. I volunteer twice a week at the community center, teaching financial literacy classes for seniors. I share my story, carefully, respectfully, as a warning about family financial abuse. You'd be surprised how many people have similar experiences they've never talked about. Last month, I updated my will again. Carlos Jr. and Maria are my primary beneficiaries now, and I've set up trust funds for my grandchildren that will help pay for their college educations. There's also a significant donation planned for the Elder Abuse Prevention Program at the local district attorney's office. Danny is mentioned in the will. There's a single paragraph stating that he has been intentionally excluded due to financial crimes against me, with full documentation attached. Richard assured me this will prevent any future legal challenges. As the sun disappears behind the mountains, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Frightened, isolated, being slowly drained by someone who was supposed to love and protect me. That woman is gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and surprisingly content. I'm not bitter, which surprises people when I tell this story. I'm sad that I lost the son I thought I had, but grateful that I found the strength I didn't know I possessed. Carlos always said I was tougher than I looked. It just took losing everything I thought I knew about my family to discover he was right. Tomorrow, I start volunteering at the local women's shelter, helping other people rebuild their lives after betrayal. It turns out that surviving your own child's deception gives you a particular kind of wisdom that can help others facing their own impossible situations. I sleep peacefully now, knowing that Carlos would be proud of how I handled the situation. More importantly, I'm proud of myself. At 72, I learned that it's never too late to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. The desert wind is picking up, and it's time to go inside. But before I do, I raise my teacup toward Carlos's photo in a small toast. "We did good, my love," I whisper. "We did real good."